All right, what is up, guys? Happy New Year. It's 2023. I started the year off saying I was going to get a podcast episode out a week this year. When I first started this thing in 2020, that was the overall goal. I got about 2 months in, and third month into 2020, obviously the world flipped upside down. Considering I feel like it was a good year, my friend Corey helped me do the bulk of the podcast if I wasn't on the road or didn't have somebody that I wanted as a guest on the podcast. So 2020 did pretty well. 2021, not so much. I kind of fell off with it. And last year really wasn't on it as much as I really wanted to. So as the end of 2022 was coming around, I really wanted to hit the ground running for 2023. As this is being recorded, it's technically the second week of January, but close enough to the beginning of the year where I'm not going to count it. If I can somehow pull it off the rest of the year, it'll be a feat. But I'm going to, I'm going to consider this the beginning of the year. At least it's not February that I'm getting the first episode of the year out. So this one, I didn't really have an overall plan for this episode other than to just kind of put out an episode for 2023, talk about stuff that's going on in the shop, project updates, some of the episodic episodes here on the YouTube. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, kind of talk a little bit about where the auto union project is at, as well as a few other things that I have kind of in, the pipeline, but also a few ideas I have for the YouTube channel with the podcast, a few video type ideas that I've been kind of brainstorming for possibly integrating this year, if it's even a good idea, and also asked for some questions from patrons on the Patreon as well for this episode. So that's kind of the mix. I am wearing my InNOut shirt. If you guys are watching on video, I'm wearing my InNOut burger pocket tee because Tennessee is getting an InNOut. So I just saw this news today, actually. I think it's going to be in Franklin, which is just south of Nashville. I haven't read too much in depth of the articles I've seen posting around. I've just kind of been reading the titles of these articles. But it sounds like Franklin, Tennessee might be getting an InNOut. And that is massive because as far as I know, I think Dallas was the farthest east InNOut had grown. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they don't want to freeze their meat. I could be way wrong on this, but from what I remember, from where their meat was coming from, any further east, they'd have to freeze their foods or something like that. So there was a reason, like a good reason, for someone like me who loves going to California or out west in one of those things I love going out there for, getting in and out as soon as I get off the plane. It was great news hearing that they were going to be spreading east. But that was also an integrity move for them because obviously they, I'm sure through market surveys, they know that they'd do very well if they were to start putting in-and-outs up and down the East Coast. But it was kind of admirable that it sounded like they didn't want to do that because it was going to compromise the quality of their food. So we'll see when that's supposed to come about. But I felt it was fitting to wear my In-N-Out pocket tee that I ordered while at an In-N-Out in Vegas for SEMA a few years ago, because it's the big In-N-Out that's near the Strip in Vegas, and there's a separate building next to it that's the store, basically. So you've got the restaurant, and then you've got a gift shop for In-N-Out as a separate building next door, and it was closed. And I really wanted an In-N-Out shirt, and I had no idea they made black pocket tees, and that is right up my alley. So I ordered that from the In-N-Out. And I don't wear it that often, but felt it was fitting for that news that Tennessee, I think, is going to be the farthest east In-N-Out burger now. They might be making all these moves in other states as it happens. And I just noticed the Tennessee bit of news because I'm here in Tennessee. So that's one thing. That's great news. Second bit of good news is I've been making a little bit of progress on the Auto Union 1000 SP. Slow. I'm not getting the amount done that I really want done. The next episode, if you're listening to this as it's coming out, the next episode is doing some suspension work on the pan. I'm not sure if it's going to be suspension work that's going to stay, but for now, I'm making some moves to get the pan in more of a configuration to get the body down over it. So from there, it's going to be floors on the pan. And if you're a first-time listener, I have a 1960 Auto Union 1000 SP. I have two of them, which is still kind of crazy, even for me to think about. But I'm putting one down over a Volkswagen Beetle Pan. And to not bore everybody who already knows why, basically it's a pretty rough car. It had a lot of rot in it. Solid, like savable for what I want to do. Pretty hefty restoration candidate if it was going to be that. But also, I want to drive the car. And Auto Union 1000 SP parts are super, super rare and hard to find. A lot of the drivetrain components are shared amongst other DKW and Auto Union chassis since they all share the same frame. They are a body and frame car, which is very bizarre for 1960, late 50s, early 60s German automotive manufacturers because they were doing a lot of unibody stuff early on. So this is a frame car. I think if I were to guess, they started doing this for the interchangeability, if that's a word, between all their models. So the DKW Junior, the 3=6, the 1000, the 1000 SP, maybe the van. I think those were all on the same frame, same drivetrain, 3-cylinder, 2-stroke, front-wheel drive, transverse leaf stack suspension, front and rear. Very, very bizarre setup, but kind of like par for the course, I guess would be the term for most German engineering around that time. They were doing a lot of like real bizarre stuff and experimenting with ideas and whatnot. So this car body's going down over a Beetle Pan, so I can buy parts for it. Because once I get it on the road, I'm not really going to want to sell it right away. Because as far as I know, this is the first body dropped and bagged 1000 SP like in the world, that's a tall order to say in the world. It's a huge world out there. There's a lot of people doing crazy stuff with cars. But I feel like in today's day and age, we're plugged in. I think we would have seen photos of a slammed one floating around the internet, even if said builder or owner wasn't on social media. I feel like we'd see photos of it. So I'm excited to kind of traverse that. But man, quote unquote, slapping it over a Beetle Pan is not the easy way with this project. Nothing lines up. I've basically gutted the whole car out. The floors are gone. Like pans are gone, like firewall's gone. Nothing lines up. So I basically have to build a tube chassis inside the body to be able to reach all the body mounts on the Beetle Pan itself. So this is stuff that I've done with my father at this level, but a project of this level, this is the first time I've ever tackled a project solo at this level. So all the other cars that I've done, which are weird cars, stuff that doesn't really have off-the-shelf bolt-in suspension components available for them. I've done a lot of projects solo, but it's been like not too much design work, just kind of light fabrication, altering of strut bodies, altering of control arms, and some light stuff. The BMW 700 that's on a Beetle Pan that I have, and the roof-chopped Corvair were two of the most in-depth design and fabrication involved projects that I've done, and my dad and I built those together. So this one's been a little slower going because I spend a lot of time staring at the body and at the Beetle Pan trying to figure out what my next move is. So that's a little frustrating. I'm not patient. I want to be ticking things off the list every day, but the YouTube channel isn't my source of income. So it's hard to be creating the content, like building the car, but creating the content while building the car and have that keep the lights on. So I've been stuck in this place where I think most serious YouTubers are at, where it's not bringing in enough money to just do that. You also have to either have a day job or a side hustle. And mine is the laser cutting and laser engraving, which I've been doing for 7 years now. I think this year, 2023, is my 8th year going into it. But it's super difficult to traverse all of that because, and I've talked about this probably ad nauseum on the podcast or in person, but it's such a crazy mental headspace where I'll focus on cultivating work for the laser business. because that is like quote unquote my main job. And I'm a sole proprietor. I'm the only person that works in my shop, and I'll cultivate work, or work will come in, which is the best feeling. When you've got returning work or somebody emails you for a job, like, I don't know how to convey this unless you've felt it yourself in person. But when you've had no money and started a business, like literally no money, like I was laid off from my job and spent everything I had on a 72 W109 Mercedes to then flip it to have enough money to purchase my first laser machine. Like, I had no money, and I was 30 years old. So I was already at 30 and I had no savings, nothing in the checking account. I spent everything I had on a Mercedes and then sold it to a friend in England to then have enough money to buy a laser machine. So I was eating dirt at 30 years old. And to back up, I was basically at that point because I rode freestyle BMX professionally in my 20s, which was a dream come true, but I made barely enough money to pay my bills. So all throughout my 20s, I wasn't being lazy and just kind of slacked off. In the financial department, I guess you could look at it as that. But going pro with BMX was unplanned, not deliberate. It just kind of happened and fell in my lap. But because BMX was one of my biggest passion since I was a kid, jumping tires off a dirt jump in my backyard when I was a kid, I ran with it. I mean, you only live once, and I took full advantage of those opportunities that came my way. So I lived through my 20s riding BMX professionally, barely making enough to pay my rent and my phone bill, and that was about it. And a few pretty bad injuries made me kind of put into focus the shelf life of my body and life if I was going to continue riding BMX professionally. So I'd always loved cars. I grew up in a shop with my dad, basically, motorsport and cars in general, modifying cars, hot rods, whatever, were more in my veins than BMX was. So when I decided to stop riding BMX full time, kind of solely to work a job that would pay me enough money to modify cars, I was kind of stuck in this place of, I just spent my 20s at most working at bike shops to fill the gaps with what I made for salary with BMX. So it was a relatively easy decade of living with little, but the quality of life was through the roof. Traveling, just riding my bike for a job, basically. So entering my 30s, I really wanted to do something that I loved to do on my own terms so I could make my own schedule and kind of live kind of like I had in my 20s with BMX. So I could kind of like call my own shots, knowing full well I was going to have to work twice as hard or more. But to come back around, the laser business, I started out of basically nothing. And so that feeling of getting an email of somebody who wants leather key rings or wooden cup coasters or anything that I might make with the laser is such a good feeling. And to come back to the balance of the laser business and what I want to do with YouTube and the cars first and foremost, but then the YouTube as like the byproduct of being like, okay, I'm going to document this whole process, but in a way that I'm going to do it very seriously, because hopefully it'll cultivate an audience to where it does become the full-time job, building these oddball cars. So spending time cultivating laser work, which is the safe bet, and then getting all of that work in, I work day and night, it seems, on those jobs, which is a blessing. But then I don't have time to work on the cars. And so then I'm starting to be like, a job will come in, I'll make a little bit of money. All right, I can take next week off to work on the cars. But then I don't really make any money on that. So when it goes the other way, when laser work kind of dries up a little bit, mostly because I'm not cultivating more work, if I get a couple jobs in, and then when those jobs are done, I'm like, finally, I'll work on the car for the rest of the month or the next week or whatever. Then I start to complain that laser work is slow because I'm not getting emails every day of more work coming in, but I'm not out there grinding to cultivate more laser work. So it's this catch-22 balance or dance that I'm constantly stuck in. So with the auto union, I really just want to be working on that car. I want to be buried in that car. So I stay focused. I know what my next step is. I can kind of lay out the plan for weeks. I mean, that'd be the dream. And we all share this dream, is if you like modifying cars and you like designing or the fabrication aspect or whatever, the dream is to do that and get paid to do it. The thing, I'm doing it backwards because I'm not trying to do it for a customer or a client. I watched my dad kind of pull his hair out most of his life doing that for other people. And I kind of always strayed away from that. I think it's a mixture of the headaches of dealing with somebody and their idea, and also constantly having to change the vision up. If they're like, no, I don't want to do this, I want to do this instead, or you think we can do this, and they see a photo of another car that's like this, and constantly kind of having to like be fluid with somebody else's vision, but also chasing money and having a project tied up on a lift or in the shop or something because they're not paying you or something. So in the way that I think I'm doing it backwards is I'm building the car for myself, putting all of my own money into that project, time and money, and then at the end, hopefully selling it for a profit. So I think the thing that I'm focusing most on with YouTube, and I'm entering my 5th year on YouTube. And as far as people who make like viral content, that's, I should be making money on YouTube by now if I was like really focusing on YouTube as a business model. So that kind of makes me always think about how to realign what I'm doing on YouTube and how to more angle it to like make money on there. But then I know that that's going to directly affect the quality of like the content and what it is I'm trying to do in real life with the cars. So that's a dance or a balance as well. So essentially the auto union is not where I want it as far as the timeline of the project, but I'm chiseling away. If you've been watching the YouTube episodes, I'm chiseling away slowly but surely. But I'm so excited to see that car laid out. I still want to Corvair power it. I don't think that's going to be its first rendition. I have that 1600 dual port Beetle motor that will bolt up to the transmission that's in the swing arm pan. At least it will now. I did some clearancing in that bell housing to allow for the 200 millimeter flywheel on the 1600. So that, as long as I've got trunk clearance, that'll go in first. It'll be Beetle powered to just get it running and driving. Then maybe later on down the road, I'll look at building a Corvair motor for it. Cause I'd love to have that thing flat 6 air cooled. No plans right now, even just pipe dream plans to do any sort of like water cooled rear engined swap. I know a lot of guys do 13B rotary motors in Beetles. There's some support out there for bell housing adapters, and guys have done. Actually, my buddy Drew in England, known as Pipey McGraw on Instagram, put a 13B on a Beetle pan underneath a Mark I Golf that was static. It was red. That thing was incredible. So he actually rotary powered that for a little bit. So that'd be really cool, but I don't have any plans to do that in the auto union. I think enough people have Corvair powered Beetles over the years to where there's enough information out there to do that without feeling like I'm getting in too deep over my head. So I'm excited though. I'm excited to see that thing panned out. My buddy Aiden did a Photoshop of that car laid out on the ground and it looks nuts. So really excited to kind of bring that to fruition. But what's standing between me and that end result is a lot of design and fabrication, and actually really kind of pushing my skill set in like building a car. I'm using air quotes there. I use that term pretty loosely, but this project is definitely deserving of the word build, because you have to build a frame inside this thing. So it's going to be challenging. That kind of leads into some shop updates. I talked about it on Instagram and in a few YouTube episodes. I'm really about ready to pull the trigger on a CNC plasma table. Did talk about Prime Weld sending me a Cut 60 after I had purchased their Cut 50 plasma cutter. So that's on the front burner. I might be buying a Langmuir Crossfire Pro, which a lot of people have paired with the Cut 60. It's a very affordable CNC table. It's a water table as well, so it keeps dust down in your shop. I've watched a ton of reviews online of that table, and I'm not looking forward to the idea of having to build it. I mean, it comes in like bags and boxes basically, but I really want to run an ArcLight Dynamics table. And so I've been talking with them. Their tables are far more expensive. And since I'm not trying to start a plasma cutting business, it's harder for me to spend $13,000 on a 4x4 foot plasma table when I'm not really aiming to make money with it. If I build a car and that table helps build parts that go on that car, and then that car gets sold and the profit can be justified as paying that machine off, that's one thing. But the Langmuir table is just over $3,500 for everything that I want. And that is super cheap. But I know that the ArcLight table is far superior in quality. So I haven't decided yet. As you can tell, I'm unbiased. I'm not working with either company. I'd like to be. I'd love to be working with ArcLight on this. So we'll see. We'll see what I finally pull for a trigger. But I've taped off the floor space that I'll need in the shop. And as I mentioned before, I'm kind of working around that space so I can kind of get used to that being used up by the table. Hoping to have that in. Man, I'm hoping to have one of those tables here in the next month or two, because I know I'm going to need it once I'm in the build phase of the auto union and having to make all sorts of things, gussets and plates and just whatever I can even construct into a 3-dimensional boxed in piece out of 2-dimensional CAD designed plasma cut pieces. That's basically it for shop stuff. I think I'll do a couple of the Patreon Q&As. This will probably be a short episode today. Like I said, just wanted to get something up to just get something out for you guys. The Patreon's still pretty slow. I shouldn't say slow. It's still pretty small is what I mean. But I cannot thank you guys enough who are over there. The link is in the description of the video and the podcast. If you guys want to help support the channel and support the shop, some of the projects in the shop, am planning to do a lot on the Patreon this year. Monthly Patreon exclusive podcast. There'll be podcast shorts. Right now, they're just solo ones. I'd really like to get guests on, but also try my hardest to do weekly episodes here, both on YouTube and all the streaming services. But what I wanted to do is start integrating the Patreon into some of the Q&As I do here on the podcast. So we've got a few here that came in that are actually pretty good questions. I think the first one that's pretty easy. Christopher Pia said, "Are you headed to Eurotripper this year, bringing the Corvair and the BMW 700?" As a question. Yes, planning on going to Eurotripper. As I'm recording this, it's 3 weeks out, which is terrifying because I'm making the awards for the show as well. And I designed them too. So that took quite a bit of time. I'm waiting on materials to show up now, and we'll be making those and bringing them with me. So I'm excited to attend. I'm super excited to be making the awards. My friend Paul Barney puts that show on. Can't thank him enough for his trust in me to make the awards, not just in general, but for this year specifically. It's the 10-year anniversary of the show. So a little bit of pressure there that I've put on myself for that. I'm not sure what I'm bringing yet. Last year I brought the 700. As of right now, this is the only German or Euro car that I have that's, worth bringing to a car show. But I've got some valve issues. That motor really needs heads, I think. And I haven't justified spending $300 per head. So basically $600 on new heads for that motor. If I bring it, it'll probably be one of those things where I just drive it off the trailer and park it and leave it there for the weekend. So I might do that. If I were to be vending with Ludwig's Garage at the show, I'd bring both cars, just because it'd be a booth car at that point. The Corvair is obviously American. They don't have an American class or category at that show. But if I was vending, I'd have both cars there. As most of you guys know, both of those cars will fit on my 24-foot car trailer, which is pretty sweet because a 24-foot car trailer is really still only a single car trailer. But being able to haul those two cars together is really cool. But I bought that 24-foot open trailer specifically, well, for two reasons. A 24-foot is just an awesome trailer to have because you've got that length if you need it. Maybe not even for just carrying cars, side-by-sides and I don't have any side-by-sides, but you can do all sorts of stuff with a 24-foot. If you have a 16 or 18-foot, you might get into a predicament where you've got a car that's too long to fit on that trailer. We put my Toyota Century, which was a long wheelbase Century, almost 20 feet long. That car was like 19 and a half feet long. We put that on my father's 18-foot trailer for the drive down here to Chattanooga when I moved here. And it was a full trailer. Like rear axle was barely on the beaver tail. Rear bumper was hanging off the trailer. It was a full trailer load. So I think the 700 possibly. I'm not sure if we don't end up taking it. My girlfriend has the 2020 GTI. Maybe we cruise down in that. That would be the most comfortable and most reliable mode of transportation to get there. She also has a Porsche 944 though, that you guys may have seen on the channel that she bought off of our friend Elliot Grafton. Not sure if we'd make the trip down in that. I think it's sorted for it. And that early 944 has a really, really long fifth gear. You get on the highway, you get to the top of fourth, and when you put it in fifth, it feels like you've put it in sixth and skipped fifth altogether. It's got a great cruising speed. You can cruise at 80 miles an hour in that car on the highway at like 2,500 RPMs or so. It's a nice highway cruiser. So yeah, I mean, kind of up in the air. Might end up, bringing the 700, cruising down in a daily driver, or possibly bringing the 944 if we get a few things done on that car. But I am planning on being there. Let me see. Max Fetter. Max Fetter says, do you have an idea of what wheels you're going to be running on the 1000 SP? So I know a lot of people have been asking me this question. I have a few ideas. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I'm far away from like knowing for sure what I'm going to run because there's a lot of work to be done yet. But I'd love to do some sort of like 80s or vintage BBS motorsport wheel that works though. So the 1000 SP is known as the Baby Thunderbird. And if you haven't seen it, definitely go check out some of the videos on the YouTube channel of me working on this car. But it looks like a miniature 57 Thunderbird. It's got these aggressive fins for rear fenders. It's almost got like an Aston Martin DB5 front end look. It's got a hood scoop and, two big, headlights out front. It's a really, really cool looking car. It's a coupe, 2-door with pop-out side windows. If a vintage German motorsport wheel can pull the look off, that's kind of at the top of the list. My friend Robert from LUDWICK'S, which is a Porsche motorsport shop in Virginia, is hell-bent on me doing wood-centered three-piece motorsport wheels. Now, this is insane, but it's a really unique idea. And he's been pulling my leg about this, saying that, a car so one-off and so bizarre like that needs equal part wheel, super bizarre one-off wheel on this car. And I hear him. I understand this. I agree. He's on this kick that I should get some woodworker to CNC cut some like teak or some really strong hardwood wood center and figure out something reinforced for a bolt menu and use like a 30-hole BBS barrel and lip combination or something and build some crazy wood wheel. And maybe that would just be for shows. You don't actually drive down the road because you have to consider like shock load, hitting a bridge expansion joint at 60 miles an hour and not having wood wheels disintegrate. Model A's and Model T's had wood wheels. Lots of other cars way back in the day that were probably heavier than this 1000 SP were on wood-centered or wood-spoked wheels. So that's a bizarre way out in the universe idea, but definitely doable. If you're watching on YouTube, leave in the comments what you think about that. Let me know what you think. I've kind of just been laughing about it, but Robert will kind of, send me a text out of the blue being like, wood wheels, like do it. But that's like bizarre, way out in left field kind of idea. BBS motorsport wheel. I don't know if I want to do a wide 5 wheel. They make a lot of really cool custom wide 5 split wheels now. I think that car could pull that off as well, since it's a 1960. It's around the same era. I mean, it's basically the same year almost as the pan that's going under it. So it would fit with an air-cooled wide 5 split wheel. Look, I think I want to do 17s. The front arches on that car are huge. It's a massive front wheel arch. So I think 17's at the smallest with that car laid out. I don't want it to look silly when I'm aired up driving. So I don't want like a bunch of wheel gap or anything. And I don't know if 18s are going to be too big. So 17s are kind of what I'm speculating might be the size. No idea what widths or specs yet, but 17s will put me in a good motorsport wheel arena as well. So we'll see. Haven't really decided, but those are a few of the ideas. Possibly a good split wide 5 wheel that's kind of period. A lot of my friends are trying to get me to do Kreger SS's like I had on the Corvair originally. They do make that wheel in a 17. The Kreger SS is much like a Supreme wheel, so possibly even a Supreme. I feel like I think that wheel would look amazing on that car, or the car would look amazing with that wheel on it. But it's like a common wheel. I don't know if I'm really going to try to go for a wheel that's super rare or odd. I don't know if some 80s retro, like blocky wheel will look weird or great on that car. I'm going to experiment with it when I get there, but I kind of need to decide sooner or later if I want to stay wide 5 or if I'm going to do new hubs for a different PCD. So I haven't decided there yet. Let me see. Scott Foster says, wanting to heavily get out of owning new cars and want to get into older BMWs again. In your opinion, what would be the best overall, or what would be best overall for someone who drives 25 to 35,000 miles a year? E36, E38, or E34? So I've had E38s and I've had E34s. I haven't owned an E36 yet. I've owned a lot of BMW platforms, but no E36. I feel like I have enough friends and there's enough information about E36s out there to where you know that they're a great car and notably reliable. I might have to swing that way, but E38's incredibly good looking, incredibly comfortable, incredibly smooth over the road. But I'm 1 for 2 with my E38s. I've had 2 of them. The first one I bought, I was driving 2 hours home and stopped halfway for dinner. And upon leaving the restaurant, it wouldn't start. It would just crank. And the E38s have an auto crank. And it wouldn't start. And after trying everything, all the different reset codes and making sure I had more than a quarter tank of fuel in it and doing everything I could do in the parking lot, I trailered it home, did a cam sensor, did a crank sensor, did a bunch of other things. Lastly, I did a compression test and I had no compression on like one bank of that motor. So more than likely what happened was I got into the plastic timing chain guides or wore through the timing chain guides and got metal in the motor and then in the top end. So that was like, I didn't even get home with that car before that happened. Now, obviously that doesn't say that an E38 is a terrible platform car. It tells that that specific car didn't get maintained and I paid for it. The second E38 I had was an incredible car. I sold it to my friend Phil from Virginia, who flew up and drove it back from New Hampshire and then dailied it, as far as I know, for years. And that car was an incredible car. But my E34 touring wagon I had was an insane car. That car had like 250,000 miles on it when I bought it. I put a ton of miles on it and then sold it to a kid from Philadelphia who then drove it for years, I think. I think last I heard that car almost had 400,000 miles on it. That was a 6-cylinder E34, not the 530 with the with like the weird parts bin V8 that was kind of like a 540, but had all sorts of hodgepodge of parts in it. So, I mean, I'd say E36 or E34. I vote E34 simply for looks, rarity. Not really rare, but you don't ever see E34s just cruising about on the street. So I love seeing E34s running around. I'd say E36 or E34. I think you can't go wrong because I might be wrong here, but I think the early E36s and late E34s had the same drivetrain in them. M50s, M50, M52. Good move though. I've wanted the daily in E36. I would love a 4-door saloon sedan. I'd love to import an E36 touring now that they're eligible for import. Simon says, I hope that this is not too upfront, but would it be possible to check out the shop sometime? Simon, if I remember correctly, he's from overseas. I'd love to do an open house. I've actually been thinking about this recently of doing like a LUDWICK'S Garage open house. I live above the shop here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I've actually been doing some yard work lately, even though it's January. to kind of prep for a possible spring like open house. Not sure if I might do a test run with just friends in the area and then maybe do something maybe offsite that has more room for cars because I don't have a ton of space here. But yeah, if you're ever in the States and you find yourself in Tennessee, man, by all means, come by and say hi and see the shop. Jimmy Smith. This is the last one. Jimmy Smith, who was the first Patreon. I gotta shout Jimmy out. I got a chance to meet Jimmy at Roll Hard in England last summer. Didn't know he was going to be there. Introduced himself as the first Patreon, which is huge because when I started the Patreon, and I've mentioned this on the podcast when I first started it, I struggled for probably 3 years about starting a Patreon. I mean, I struggled for years with a serious dose of imposter syndrome. And even though this is coming from someone who rode, BMX professionally, I grew up in a small town in the woods of New Hampshire. So every time I signed an autograph for some kid at a skate park or wherever we were doing demos or at Interbike in Vegas, it almost didn't make any sense. It was almost like all the people surrounding me are the ones who should be signing autographs, not me. So with the Patreon, it wasn't about BMX. It would almost feel a little bit more natural if it was with BMX because it would be like, all right, I've had this career in BMX and here's a channel of behind the scenes and a closer look or more connectivity, more correspondence with me. It would be like a hub where I could do more and it'd make more sense. I feel like with the cars, it just felt like imposter syndrome. I felt like what kind of value can I bring to anybody that would want to be like consuming this? So when I started it, I kind of just pulled the trigger and said, well, no one's going to sign up to this, but it'll be there anyway. And it'll make me feel like I overcame whatever hesitations I was feeling in starting it in the first place. So Jimmy was the first one that signed on the day I promoted it. The first day I started it, Jimmy signed on and that's huge. He'll always be the first one who signed on. So, shout out to Jimmy. It was awesome to meet you in person in England last summer. His question is, if you could slam and modify $100,000 plus car, what would it be? Plus, love the content. So I thought about this for a little bit before I recorded. And it's so hard if I had $100,000 disposable for a project, I think most of you guys know that I would buy multiple $10,000 projects because that's just what I like. I like weird stuff. But it's crazy to think that these cars are $100,000 now. But one of my dream one of my dream projects was to bag a W100 600 Mercedes. So I had never seen, until recently, I'd never seen anyone like slam, air quotes, slam a Mercedes 600. Now, the W100s were built from, I think, 1963 to 66 or 64 to 69. Like, it's basically mid-60s, and it was the flagship Mercedes. So you had the W108s and the 109s, which were born out of the W111s. They were kind of like the first S-Class Mercedes. They were the full-body luxury cars from Mercedes. Well, the 600s were a totally different platform car, and they were motorcade level cars. They made the regular W100 600s, which were 4 doors at like a normal wheelbase, and then they made what they called the Pullman, which were 6 door, even longer. They had jump seats to fit even more people, or rear facing middle row, basically with partition windows. And they were just like the creme de la creme flagship Mercedes. And back about, I'd say 11 years ago, it's probably 2012, I had just finished my 1960 W111 Heckflossen, so my fintail. I had a 4-speed on the column, high-jack, W111 280 SE, 220 SE. SB, I'm sorry. It was an SB, and what the SB stood for, if you're a Mercedes guy, you'll know this. SB was the full chrome package. So it had chrome trim everywhere. On top of the fin for the rear fender, the C-pillar had a chrome like decorative piece. The wheel arches had chrome. The sill, like along the rockers, had chrome. It had every option available for 1960. I found, while I had that car, I found two W100s at Beverly Hills Car Club out in California. And Beverly Hills Car Club is infamous for selling like high-end exotic cars, but also barn find cars. Like they'll have like, I window shop there all the time. And although I've never bought anything from them, it's really cool seeing what they're selling that was clearly pulled right out of a barn, still got dust on it, or something that had an engine fire. And they'll sell for what used to be somewhat cheap. Well, in 2012, I found two W100s on their site. One was a left-hand drive German or American market one that was kind of like mid-restoration. It had new paint. So somebody had done body work or prep and then paint. So it had beautiful paint, but the interior was roached out and it was missing a lot of components, missing trim, missing headlights, a lot of 600 specific parts that are super hard to find and super expensive. I think they wanted like $17,500 or $18,000 for that car, which today is an unreal price for that car. But they also had a right-hand drive one, which I think is, I don't know what the numbers are, but I feel like they made very low number right-hand drive ones. But there was a either South African market or British market, maybe even Japanese market, right-hand drive 600 that was like a basket case. It was a car, you know, it had wheels and it was a rolling car, had a motor in it, but it was like rough exterior, missing trim, roached out interior. Everything was ripped apart in the car, dash, seats, floors, all that stuff, headliner. But they wanted $7,500 for this car. And I did not have that kind of money in 2012. I didn't have that money to spend on a car. So I thought about selling my Fintail right away to buy the W100, but I didn't because I felt like the W100 would just be too insane to try to restore or to try to find parts for or to even get running again. But to answer the question, I think that because they're $100,000 cars now, I'd really like to bag one of those cars. And Daniel Matt, let me pull him up here. A couple friends from Poland have actually done one. They bagged one. And what I think is really cool is it's a rough one. Daniel Mandat. Shout out to Daniel. So he's in Poland and him and some friends recently bagged a 600 that is, and you might have seen some photos of it circulating the internet. I think they brought it to Worthersy the last year that they kind of had it. But it's a rough one. It's got like a roached out interior. It's got patina. You know, I don't even know if it runs, but they bagged it on wheels and they brought it in on like a bagged trailer. And it just, I saw that recently too. And it's totally resparked the flame to want to somehow acquire one and bag it, even if it's in rough shape, and just let it be what it is. Those cars were really insane. Everything ran off the hydraulic system, basically off the brake system. The doors auto shut with hydraulics. The windows were hydraulics. Obviously the braking system, the suspension was hydraulics. I think the trunk soft shut with hydraulics. So if you've got an issue with the hydraulic system or a pump or something like that, nothing is going to work. They were just like super technologically advanced for the day. I think that's it. That's a long-winded answer. There's a slew of cars probably that are $100,000 plus that I would love to own and bag or slam or do something really cool with. Especially now, you know, in the last 5 years, a lot of cars that were sub $100,000 are now to the moon. You also said $100,000 plus, which doesn't mean there's a ceiling. So if there was no ceiling, you know, Lamborghini Miura, Mercedes 300 SL, then that's not necessarily to like just slam, but to like lower and build like an outlaw car or something. Like I've always wanted to have an outlaw style 300 SL, Steely's, something that looked like it just came off the Mil Miglia or ran the Isle of Man, or just like like Jay Leno's 300 SL. It's got patina. It's unrestored. It's a runner. It's loud. It's violent. It's just like this real bare bones, the essence of Mercedes motorsport before they essentially pulled out of motorsport in 1955 after the Le Mans crash. So that's like bucket list, like unobtainable car. But I think a W100 could be obtainable if I were able to hustle hard enough and buy and sell a few projects and just kind of squirrel my money away and somehow afford one. But there's too many. I like too much stuff. I think if the YouTube channel is turning into anything, it's turning into a portfolio of the weird oddball cars I love, like airbagging or slamming on the ground, notably with the Auto Union right now, but with a slew of cars in the records of the stable here at the shop. So I just like weird stuff. And I think if the YouTube channel does well at all at any point, it'll be in that vein. Because I don't see myself suddenly building S-chassis Nissans. Although I've had one before, I like the way they look. Would love to do one with like a new, not new, but like a different take on styling. You know, maybe something that's like, I don't know, just out of the box for how people modify those cars. But I don't think I'm ever gonna like sway from the cool, weird, well, what I consider is cool, weird cars in the YouTube, or on the YouTube here in the shop. There's a few other projects that I really am chomping at the bit to get to after the 1000 SP. And some of them I've talked about, some of them I just kind of keep quiet because there's some cars that are like super cheap that I haven't seen body dropped or slammed before that I think have been left alone because people don't see a vision for them. And maybe they're pointless. And I'm the only one that would think that they look cool slammed on the ground. But there's a few nonetheless that I'm really chomping at the bit to get to when 1000 SP is done. So for now, that's on the list. This has been a quick episode to just get out. I don't even know what else to talk about from there. Merch. Well, we'll leave you guys with merch. As of today, I've pulled the trigger on some hoodies, new designs from Matt Varker in England. I've been working with him at Varker Design. He's worked with my friend Ben Walker from Ain't Dead Yet over there. He's worked with a bunch of high-end shoe companies, and we've put together a cool new layout of some designs I want to use this year in 2023. So the first of those designs is going to be coming out on some pullover hoodies. I'm going to be printing on Champions for the first time. I had Champion hoodies when I was a kid before they became kind of like a hype brand, but I really, really like Champion clothing. I like the way the sweatshirts feel. They're kind of a more heavyweight. So this run of sweatshirts is going to be on Champion hoodies, pullover hoodies. Hopefully we'll have those out and available or in hand in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye on the Instagram, keep an eye on the YouTube. I'll be keeping everybody up to date on those. Different colorway too. I'm really kind of excited to see how you guys like the new colorway of this particular run. After this initial batch, I will restock these for Riverside, which is in April here in Chattanooga, because I will be vending that show. I might not be at Eurotripper with the booth, but I will be at Riverside with the LUDWICK'S Garage booth with the Corvair, the 700, hopefully a whole new run of soft goods, hats, and some hard goods that I make here in-house in the shop. Really excited to hopefully have a new layout for Riverside and maybe some shows beyond there. It takes a lot logistically and financially to vend shows. If you own a brand that hustles at every event under the sun throughout the year, I cannot give you more props because that is expensive to invest in all sorts of inventory and hope that you do well. So Riverside will kind of be, it'll kind of be like my test run of whether or not I really try to vend further in 2023 or put my efforts and money elsewhere. So April, can't remember the date. I'll look it up now because it's worth it so I can plug Riverside if you guys are thinking about coming out to it. Riverside here in Chattanooga is April 15th, Riverside 8. So come on out. But that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching and for listening. These solo episodes are so hard. I know I say that every time I put out these solo episodes. I feel like they'll be the majority of the episodes this year if I do end up getting them out weekly. I need to start traveling more to have friends on the podcast or get them convinced to come to Chattanooga so they can sit here with me in studio. I do not want you guys having to listen to me every week. I want my friends to tell their cool stories, and so you guys can listen to their journeys and their stories as well. But for now, It's me solo for the mere fact of getting these episodes out every week. Thank you for listening. Links are in the videos and podcast episode descriptions to the web store, ludwicksgarage.com, and the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you in the next episode.